Hello there, my name is Ben Marshall and I'm in Frederick, Maryland. And today I'm going to talk about my project that is on dynamic soil properties, and it's going to be testing the phosphorus values and heavy metals in a cropped versus a forestland site along the Potomac River, which is in the mid-Atlantic. So what is a dynamic soil property? Dynamic soil properties are properties that change with natural and anthropogenic disturbances, including agriculture and wildland management. They are indicators of soil function and soil change over a human time scale. So some examples may include testing for carbon stocks in the soil every month, testing how pH levels fluctuate for the plant roots during the year, or determining if a plow pan can revert back to its natural soil over many years. So this project, I'm going to talk about determining if phosphorus and heavy metals are different in the cropped and the forested sites along the floodplains of the Potomac River. We're also going to try to see if any legacy sediments or buried horizons are in these profiles. So the procedure for this project is we sample one main pad-on down to 200 centimeters and two satellite pits, which down to 50 centimeters or more. And we describe all the pits, including the horizons and the ecosite. And we also collect the following materials. So we do a bulk material, clods, undisturbed material, a known volume, which is a core, a metal core, and any biological crusts that may be on the surface. So here's a picture of the area, the extent along the Potomac River. And on the right side here is the two islands I'll be working on, where these little yellow dots are. So some discussion on my project. Do crop sites have more phosphorus than forested sites, for example? We'll see. Is organic matter less for crop sites? Does the pH have any effect on the plant nutrients, like phosphorus, for example? So I'm going to share with you results I have from a similar project, which I sampled 32 sites down to 2 meters and ran the samples through the XRF machine, the X-ray spectrum analyzer, and we tested for phosphorus and heavy metals. So here's an extent map of all the points I did from Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, down to almost Washington, D.C., but not quite all the way. Okay, here's a short video that we did of our field day. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. So here's some results we got from the study for lead. So normal lead levels for vegetable production are between 10 and 70 parts per million. The chart below breaks out the flood bank soil versus the islands, the left versus the right. I wonder if I can highlight. Yeah. Here's your flood bank and island and the lead levels, and they were fairly consistent except for a couple on the flood bank side here, which were between 100 to 200 parts per million. And these were near an abandoned train depot, and that's why they have elevated levels of lead. Here's a chart of the lead, arsenic, copper, and chromium all shown together. So if you look at the blue line, which is your flood bank soils, and the red line is the island soils, you can see how the blue line is a lot higher than the red on pretty much every single one of these elements. Lead, copper, and chromium all had a lot higher levels than the flood banks versus the islands. And then when you got down to about 105 centimeters, the flood banks and islands kind of leveled. So here's results for iron. On average, the islands had about 16,000 parts per million, and the flood banks had about 28,000, so almost twice as much. And that was pretty consistent throughout the whole extent. This could be from a combination of coarser textured soils, lesser microbial activity, a less stable landscape, and more flooding events. The iron is being flushed out of the system. So here is phosphorus and pH values from the lab results. Acceptable phosphorus limits are 30 to 50 parts per million. And there wasn't much correlation between, I was looking at the phosphorus values versus the pH values. And the pH values are below. So if you look at the phosphorus soil, and then below it is the pH of that same site. So we had pHs of between 7.5 to 8.3, so fairly high. And I was looking to see if there's any correlation of like a high phosphorus or high pH, or high phosphorus and low pH values, or something like that. But I didn't see any correlation in that case. Here's two examples where the phosphorus levels in the soil were higher than the horizon above it, which could lead to the question if they were old buried horizons or legacy sediments from a long time ago. And the arrows represent where those higher levels occur. Okay, I'm going to try to speed through this one. This is arsenic values from the XRF gun, and it shows from a distance along the river, also with the dots or elevation plots. So it really didn't have any correlation of arsenic levels correlating to higher or lower as you go downstream. So general results we found, they're going to be similar to our DSP project, and we're still waiting on lab results for that. Flood banks tended to have about twice as many heavy metals as the islands because of higher clay content, maybe greater CEC, or proximity to the urban sources. Samples had between a pH between 7.5 and 8.3, which is higher than the surrounding uplands. Two sites in particular had the highest values for zinc, chromium, and lead. They're about a half-mile away from the abandoned train depot. And we did find a lot of buried A horizons, and they were found between usually at about 30 centimeters or 120 centimeters. And the flood banks typically had higher or finer textures, and the islands are typically coarser textures. And we found that the XRF could not accurately detect phosphorus levels. So the expected outcome of the DSP project, cropped farmland would probably have more calcium, magnesium because of the fertilizers and amendments that were used for growing. The forested land in a natural state should have a little bit lower pH because of the stability of the soil. And organic matter will be less for the cropped sites, and the compaction or plow pan might be an issue for any of the crop sites. If you have any questions, contact myself or Phil King. Thank you.